everyone, thanks for coming back after the break. We're going to begin this session, this afternoon session, with Iain Weir from University of West England, and he's going to talk to you about assessing first year stats using e-tests. So I'll hand over to Iain.
Lovely. Thank you very much for the invite, Hayley. I used to be at Glasgow 25 years ago, so it's wonderful to come back sort of thing after all this time. Just a quick one, people in the room, how many statisticians we got? The chosen few. Right, that's good. I mean, okay, for the mathematicians, hopefully, just like the talks we've just seen, I've got some great ideas, even though that was to do with computer science and the rest of it. The comparative judgment thing, I think, is wonderful. It's got me buzzing about what I want to do sort of next term. And someone's talking about it this afternoon, this statistician, by the looks of it, someone in there, is it? With the Bradley Terry model. I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, so what it's all about, a first year statistics students, assessing them, where I'm sort of using a lot of all digital stuff and the rest of it. So I would like to talk about that. So, how's things working? Oops. There we go. So digital era. So here I am in the now. As I said, I've been at UE Bristol for practically 25 years. So that's where I am, and I'm talking about the course I'm actually teaching now. Part of it, you know, me writing this talk was thinking about in the future, you know, what direction are we supposed to be going in? Okay, and I guess that's why we got this conference. And also that reflection in the past, you know, just what I've been doing for the last 25 years has been quite interesting for me, a cathartic experience. UE has a 2030 policy, but by then I'll be 67 and hopefully not working. And so I looked for something that's a little bit closer. So I found this quite useful, 2025, with 5 principles and 5 targets. And, you know, again, as I worked through what I was going to present today, I was thinking, you know, measuring myself up. Craig's already made me feel very inferior with the accessibility this morning. But you know, that's good. It's given me things to look at. So the 5 points are authentic assessments designed to prepare students for where what they do next, using technology in their careers. You know, good point. The accessibility, Craig's already sort of touched on that as well. Appropriately automated, that balance it's talking about getting you know, the automated marking, but still some of the handwritten marking. Having things continuous, as opposed to, for instance, maybe traditionally where we had the exam at the end. You know, can we spread that out a bit more so it is slightly a bit more continuous? And the security of these, how can we guarantee the students are going to do things? So I think these are all interesting points. So the past, obviously, you know, to know where you are, the present is, you know, part of that is to think back of the past. And for me, I kind of thought, what was it like when I left Glasgow and went to UE? And this was teaching in 1998, a little bit of a brainstorm. Chalk and talk, spent a lot of time probably doing this with my backs to people. That seems really sort of antiquated. And of course, what Ailey's shown us, that you can still do that and you can actually look at people now. If you've got that wonderful studio, which haven't, that looked fantastic. So chalk and talking, yes, in 1998, it was chalk, I seem to remember how horribly messy that was, but, you know, we progressed and evolved into whiteboards, and then it was messy with pens as well. OHP slides with, did we call them felt tips? I didn't even remember what we called them. Handouts, used to give handouts. We haven't done that in Bristol for about 5 years. We're told not to. That was quite radical at the time, but I've kind of got used to it. And I guess the current students don't know any different, and they're used to it. Certainly 1998, students calculated statistical tables. Well, that's what's disappeared in my, certainly on my experience. There was no reliance on students having to own any electronic device, whereas now it's kind of expectation that they'll have a phone, they can do things, or laptops are appearing everywhere. How did it work? What digital did we have? Email we had, but you know, I can't ever remember using it in 1998. Did I ever contact students to tell them things? You know, like now we put announcements up in Blackboard. I don't think we did that. I can't remember what we did. I think we probably just had a notice board somewhere. Is anyone old enough to remember these days? Is it just me? Am I the oldest person in this room? Probably am, aren't I? So that was quite interesting to go to the past. And then, of course, to think about my own personal digital evolution experience as all these digital things came in. So here's a whole host of things which I think I'm currently using. I think that's true. No particular order, it's just a brainstorm of all the things that, you know, are part of the digital era that have appeared. I think I've been very fortunate that I am a musician in my spare time. And as a musician, going back to at the time when I joined UE, I was very interested, you know, I've got a small studio in the background, so things like microphones, I was making videos for bands and things like that. So I've always been interested in this thing. And in fact, I sort of worked out in the early 2000s how I could get recorded lectures and things like that as supplementary things. And I was doing that very early. I mean, I got a grant mid-2000s, 2005, something like that. And the grant really was because I wanted the Adobe Creative Suite to make things, band videos. But I thought, well, I'll do it with work and that will get me this, you know, I'm sorry, I'm altruistic, you know, we are teaching, but sometimes you've got to be looking after yourself. And to me, that's a key theme in this digital era is, are we doing this just for the students? But to me, it's not. It's more than that. It's the balance. I'm also doing some of these things for myself to make my life easier. And that's a common theme, that sort of thing. So, but anyway, I was into videos and things like that very, very early on when I look back on it. So I dare say probably most of these things people do use themselves, apart from this last one in red, maybe people not have heard of. I think, George, you would have obviously heard of it. So Deris RE assessments is something that was born and bred from UE, so that might be one that you don't know about. So I better start talking about that. So back in 2007, the colleagues of mine, Reese and Karen, they kind of invented this e-assessment system. It's open source. Very much, you know, the students, it was geared up for mathematicians, so they'll do integration questions. It wasn't from a bank of questions, it would be randomly generated sort of thing. And obviously then the student does their answer and they get the feedback. That was wonderful. So that was geared up for mathematicians. And then about 2013, I got involved and it became sort of a little offshoot, more or less peculiar to me, Deris R. So R, if you're a statistician, it's the statistician's programming language. I was told in 2013 by my boss at the time, we want you to basically do some service teaching to 1,000 business students. We don't want any marking. We want it all automated. And I was thinking, how do we do that as with, you know, these statistics students to do something that's going to be replicating the sort of stuff that we were doing at the time. So I got involved. So sticking R into it, we worked out, you know, I wanted to code things in R, and the benefit of all the statistical functions are in there to allow me to write the coding, whatever. So it became Deris R, this offshoot, using R script. Currently, this is just me in the academic year just gone through. I think 2,000 UE students will be assessed using Deris R out of 30,000, something like that. So that's across 3 faculties plus some federation colleges. So now widely used, certainly at UE, if nowhere else. So challenges to overcome by e-testing, you know, I was thinking about what do I need to overcome, and I believe I have overcome. One of the things is how do I get the students to self-learn, for instance, SPSS is the computer stats package they've got to use. So very much when I was thinking about designing these things, I wanted all that built in, you know, so I don't actually teach any SPSS at all. So they pick that up themselves, that's all self-learn in their journey. So that's something that I've overcome. How to get them up to a certain level of statistical competency and understanding. Again, I believe through all this Deris R stuff, I'm putting the onus onto the students to do that. I'm doing sort of, I feel like I'm doing a lot less in my teaching and they're doing a lot more, which I think is a good direction to be going. How to support them so that they can do formal report writing. I've kind of built that into all my assessments. So that's going in there. How to efficiently assess the students. Well, of course, we all know that with these systems, with the automated marking, allows you to very efficiently do 1,000 business students. Okay. And also have that ability to monitor progress and to be able to target those that are struggling. So to me, it was all a win-win to get involved. And there's some of the things, the benefits I've been having. One of the key things I have are these, what I call Deris key skill assessments. So these are just formative in all the modules that I teach. And what these are a very narrow focus on one particular statistical idea. And the idea is just master that one particular idea before you then move on. So kind of break each week down, we'll have a number of key skills that they're supposed to do. So these key skills are also designed through my programming to encompass the range of all possible statistical outcomes. So, you know, through this random generation, if they keep repeated use of this, sometimes they'll get questions where they've got significant answers, sometimes not significant. Sometimes it's be data that's suitable for a particular statistical test, as opposed to other times it'd be for another test, and they've got to make those decisions. So all of those things are kind of built in to these formative key skill assessments. Encourage repeated use until the student has mastered this particular technique, and indeed then they should be comfortable with all the various possible outcomes that they could get when they meet a new set of data for themselves. The Dennis Management System allows for the monitoring and attendance and engagement and ability. I found that very, very useful. This whole point is straight away from week one, I can see who's engaging is the important thing to me. Attendance isn't compulsory for our lectures or our tutorials and the rest of it. But to me, you know, what is compulsory is engagement. And I can see who's engaging with my key skills to sort of get the warning signs about who we might be losing, for instance. Just have a quick look at one here. Here's a very simple Derris key skill. This is just to do with looking at 95% confidence intervals. Very simple question. It talks about IQs. IQs in the population should be on average 100. So here we've got some data, so random data. So this is what we've got on this particular run. Got a box plot there representing the IQs of some people that have taken a certain medication. Some medications might make us more dopey, some might make us more intelligent, and some might not affect our intelligence. Okay, so in this particular case, if we look at that box plot quite clearly here, we've got a medication here that's not going to be a good one. It looks like it's making you a bit more dopey as such. What happens when a student does this? Well, first of all, by design, I always have a graphic. And it's the thing, it's immediately to get that interest into the student. Okay, you know, is this mean of this data set, has it, you know, still got a mean of 100 or not? If I'm demonstrating this at the beginning of a tutorial, the fact that I can just randomly do it and some data comes up, I immediately just start talking about a lot of things from that graphic about the direction that the analysis will be going before even touching SPSS to do some analysis. Next thing is they've got to download some data. So download some data from CSV. This has got to be read into SPSS. So there we go, the students got their stuff into SPSS. If they're not sure how to do that, embedded all the way through these key skills are help pages. So this is what I said, I don't teach SPSS anymore. If they want to find out how to do it, or they don't know how to do it, they can't remember how to do it, just have a look. And hundreds of pages I've had to write. This whole thing, a common thing I think we're going to hear, that these digital things is a big setup fee, but you get the payback, hopefully. Okay, so help pages, all embedded in there. I don't teach SPSS anymore. Self-check, crap in, crap out, I always say, but I normally say that in a slightly different way. Crap in, crap out. If they muck up this process for whatever reason, then obviously all the analysis is going to be wrong. So always make sure that there's a quick check here. We look at the standard error of the mean of any variables. If it matches what the student gets when they start doing things in SPSS, they can guarantee that they've actually got the correct data in. You know, quite often it is a common thing, students will be picking up wrong data sets and things like that, and then they're trying to work out why they're getting all the answers wrong. So data transfer check, that's important. That check also in this particular case, actually what they've got to do to get this output in SPSS, that check's there, part of the output they need to get anyway, and you can see it matches. So they've got the confidence, they've got the right data set, okay. So there we go, we've got the right data set. It's important to tell them accuracy of, of answers. Generally, I have whatever they see on the screen, and I've had to do all the Derris coding to make sure any statistical thing that I do matches what SPSS says on its screen. Sometimes that's challenging, okay? Generally it's not, but sometimes it is. So then we come into putting some answers. As I said, one of the things, formal report writing. So here, how would you write a confidence interval? Very simple way, but they've got that practice of the formal sort of writing. I've looked at output. I've put in 3 answers there from this output, which says what the mean is, sample size, and the lower confidence interval. I've not answered that, okay? These 3 actually are correct. Here we've got green and red. In the feedback that the student ultimately gets, green means that they've got a correct answer when they see their answers. Red means they've got something wrong or not answered. Accessibility wise, I believe in the latest Derris, you'll be able to hover over here. Anyone that can't distinguish between green and red, that's been the case before, things like that. Reminds me to talk about. We've got to make some say whether we believe now that the IQ on this medication is higher or lower or the same. I put in an incorrect answer there just to show you. When the student submits, Immediately, they kind of get told, you know, things have got wrong or right, and a mark. But if they go into feedback, they can get a lot more. First of all, what do they get? Well, there's the students' answers, and we can see here, green, we've got 3 things right, something not answered, and something wrong. Okay, so you can then look at the solutions and possibly work out where you got wrong. But also, they've got that ability to put in extra feedback to explain the answer. And invariably, I start programming these when I do this in a class and I see what are common mistakes, and I try to explain to people, you know, you've got to see where this confidence interval is, and where's 100? Is it over here, there, or there? And rather than do that every week, 5 times or whatever, how many times you do in a class, just thinking, let's get it built in here so they can do all that. So all of this is trying to tell them how to use that information. So again, built into here, hopefully I'm doing less as I work out what the students actually need to be told. So in the old days of 3 R's, do you remember, anyone remember the 3 R's? It was reading, writing, and arithmetic. Obviously, spelling never counted in those days, but in many ways, that was ahead of its time, you know, with all LOL and OMG and all the rest of it, and everything's spelt wrong these days anyway. So, you know, it's okay to have 3 R's like that. This person challenged that idea. Anyone know this person? No, I'm showing my age. Looks like he's an academic, doesn't he? Possibly, you know, whiteboard, microphone, etc. Could be an old professor. Heineken might be giving it away, sort of thing. It's actually Marky Smith, the late, great Marky Smith. And in one of his songs in 1978, he said the 3 R's, repetition, repetition, and repetition, which again might be a kind of an old archaic way of thinking about things. But in my mind, I am a dinosaur, I do believe that people have got to keep on doing things until they've got things right. So, of course, if they didn't do well on that key skill, let's go back, have another go here. This randomly generated data, does this still look like it's got an average of 100? In this case, it looks like yes. This medication doesn't appear to be making any difference to the IQ. And sure enough, if the student does it, they should hopefully pick up on things. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Practice makes perfect, another old thing we used to say. So marks and feedback. So through the DOIS management system, staff can view the marks and feedback of every student attempt, which is obviously very useful. Okay, again, that's one of those things, it allows me to see what are common misunderstandings amongst the cohort. And the current work that I'm doing is very much concerned with MAL rules. So for instance, as a statistician using SPSS, if you're testing to see whether mean is 100, by default, when you use SPSS, I don't know why, but it actually tests to see whether the mean is 0. I'd much rather have it blank, but you know, the whole point, it says 0. Lots of students don't pick up on this, and of course they're just saying, well, your DOIS answers is wrong, because I keep getting it wrong. As soon as I see a t-value that's incredibly large, I just think, I know exactly what you've done, and you haven't sort of pointed that out. So MAL rules, current work, it will be coming into feedback that if I can detect, I should know that if they've still got it set to 0 as opposed to changing it to what the null hypothesis is, I can detect that, and then there'll be information coming out. So that's all stuff that's currently going to work on, working on. Students, of course, can come back at a later date and view feedback. And that's useful when they're seeking this sort of understanding, want to contact me. Okay, so it all seems to work very well to me. If anyone's interested in seeing a bit more, a couple of years ago I did an Iain's talk and I set up this resource. This resource talks about the first 5 weeks of a 12-week module for business students. So you've got what I do in the first 4 weeks, and it leads up to a first in-class test that they do. So if you go onto that, either contact me and I can send you that link, or however we work it out. So you can go in there. I think in the first 4 weeks they have 11 key skills, and you can try them all, kind of see what they're doing, and it talks about the rationale of each of these key skills and leads to the first in-class test that actually sat. So you can check through that if you're more interested. What I'm actually talking about is, again, the evolution of it. I developed all this stuff very much through service teaching, where we had large numbers. Only 2 years ago did it then come onto the maths programme, finally at last, sort of thing. So big curriculum rewrite that started 2 years ago. So this is a level 1 statistics module. There's the outcomes. We're expecting them to use stats and solve problems, work out what analysis they should be doing given either their data or their research question. Use statistical software to do that, and then finally sort of communicate those results and in a way that's suitable for a formal report. Those were the 4 module learning outcomes. Okay, part of the blurb that was in the specification for this module was that students were to develop their acquired knowledge via a substantial problem-based learning activity where they develop critical awareness, intuition and interpretation skills in the application of statistical procedures. So that's going to be the second half of the talk, is where I got to dealing with that. How do we make sure that gets made? In the current year, this is the second run, we've got 42 active students. So it's a smaller module compared to some of these large cohorts that I've been dealing with in service teaching. Syllabus, no real surprises in there. So, okay, if you're a statistician, you probably say, yeah, I do that, I've done the rest of it. So no real surprises. Part of the curriculum refresh, which was, in fact, keeping up with the digital age, getting rid of calculators and statistical tables, has actually liberated a lot of space, because, we used to do all these things where, look this up in the tables and use your calculator, this and the rest of it. And so in this curriculum refresh, it has allowed us to cascade stuff down from the second year into the first year. So now the first year, in my mind, is far better in the new digital era, because it's got more content, okay, in an authentic way that they're going to do it. When they go to their next employer, they're not going to be using statistical tables, that's for sure. Assessment strategy, right, so that's what we're interested in. Series of in-class tests. These are distributed throughout the year, and these are to assess the student understanding of concepts and techniques, together with their ability to apply them, okay? It's the best 5 from 6. Again, that's sort of could be argued to be a little bit of an accessibility thing, especially going through the COVID thing. You've got COVID one week, you're going to miss a test. Don't worry, you can still get a top mark. That's the one you're not going to count, sort of thing. So I will spin that as accessibility. That's worth 50% of the module. Okay, so now, thing about that replaces the traditional form of the exam, which of course traditionally was at the end of the year, wasn't it? Okay, whereas this, we're now doing it continuous, buzzwords from the 5 principles. So doing it a slight, well, not quite continuous, but a little bit more continuous, and that's replacing the traditional form of the exam. They also had to do a portfolio. Portfolio has 2 parts in it. One is they've got to do some written solutions to problems, which shows their understanding of the mathematical statistics theory, so integration signs and things like that in there. That's worth 15% of the module. And the other bit is end of module written assignment, which is reporting the activities of a week-long problem-based learning activity that's designed to test their understanding of material and the formal testing reporting. Okay, that's worth 35% of the module. So with this, very much this portfolio is handed in at the end. Okay, last week of teaching is this week-long problem-based exercise. So here we still have something which is a traditional form of coursework. It looks very similar to what happened when I first joined UE 25 years ago. Whereas this has now replaced that traditional form of coursework. It's radically, completely different. Teaching schedule, the important thing to note, this is one of these things, I'm not just thinking about what's going on in my module. At UE, we kind of think about what's going on in all the other modules in various weeks. Okay, so this is part of the curriculum refresh. And part of this is that we have these things called program weeks. So what happens in the program week, in a normal week, a student would have their 4 modules that they're discussing. 3 of them are maths, 1 of them will be me, statistics, the odd one out. But what happens in program week is you just concentrate on one module and you just work about one module throughout the week. So here in the first semester, we've got a program week, we're doing some math stuff. So it gives me a bit of space to catch up on things. So I quite like that idea. We can see in the second semester, there's another program week, so they're doing maths all that week. And then finally, we see here in week 9, we've got project week. This is where they're all mine. Okay, so I have them for the whole week, and I do use them Monday to Friday. We're going to see that in a moment. And also what you might notice, we do 12-week terms, and you can see this second one for me ends in week 9, because what I would have been doing is all condensed into this week. So again, I really like this. This is working for me. It works for the students as well, because it means at the end of this point, this is a self-contained week where they'll do the work, reports handed in the portfolio next week, and then that's it. They don't have to worry about me. They can concentrate on the maths modules and the other things that are going on. So again, I think it works for everybody. So a little quick bit about organisation. So you can see from that we had sort of a lectorial, a computer practical, and group tutorials. So setting things up on Blackboard, nice sort of organisation each week, always looks the same. The lectorial, it's all flipped teaching. Okay, again, this is part of the benefit of going through that COVID times when we were told to make videos. A lot of my colleagues, I mean, this is my experience, because I've been fortunate to have been going along with the digital age, it was no problem to me to do these things. Some other colleagues would have to, for the first time, think about how do I record something and what equipment I've got. I had none of these issues. So I made sure I put a lot of effort. I didn't quite have some of the recording facilities that you got in Glasgow. That's very posh. But I think mine were pretty good quality for, you know, I already had green screens and all the rest of it. So I had a bit of fun making all these videos over lockdown. So decided to go to flip teaching, make these things, and again, get them to work for me. If I'm going to put the effort in for the first year of COVID, I want to then keep on using them for at least a few years, get some worth out all that effort that went in there, which again is important, you know, for me. Mentimeter, using that during COVID, it was a new one that came along. This year that I've just gone through is the first time I used Mentimeter. I'm trying to work out, do I like it? Is it working for me? Is it working for them? In a till room, first time I used a till room. Is it working for me? Is it working for them? All things have been going through my mind this year. Computer practicals, that's very much in a traditional computer lab. Case studies, group tutorials, we're doing group work, again, in a till room. So this is all kind of a new way of teaching for this year. Looking at electoral stuff, this is all the stuff I'm expecting to do before I see them for my consolidation electoral. So in there, they've got the lecture PowerPoint slides, if they want to use them. They've got supporting notes, if they want to use them. And they've got the data that's used. So that's there. They've then got the video, which I'll break up into two halves to make it a bit more bite-sized, you know, for them. Works really well for me because a lot of the time I'm doing a new statistical technique where, for instance, there'll be the one sample t-test is the best test. And if your data is not quite fit for that, there's a second choice test. And so it naturally always kind of did fit into, well, that's part one, that's part two. So again, worked really well for me. What happens in between and post that before I see them, again, put a lot of effort into mid-post lecture direct activity to produce all the output that's in the lectures. Again, I don't teach SPSS anymore. This is all in there. The expectation is on them to do the work, not me. Okay, again, I'm interested to know who just uses the videos. Who is it worth me doing these supporting notes? You know, does anyone look at these slides anymore? I'm not really sure what's going on. But the thing I say to the students is that you've got three different sort of explanations of each lecture. You know, you're really rich in the sort of stuff you're getting. You've got the lecture where I talk about it. However, what comes out of my mouth, a bit like now, you know, whatever I say goes down on camera. Or the supporting notes where I probably thought about things a bit more. So, you know, but will be quite different. So two different opinions. And then, of course, they come through to the consolidation lectorial with Mentimeter, where we go over selected bits, and they've got that third time that I go through things. So, you know, I think, again, quite a good deal out of things here. As I said, I run Menti for the first time, wasn't sure how it's going to work. I ended up really, really liking it. I think it worked for them. You know, feedback here, things like find your lectures the best. I always find feedback like that to myself quite good. But also, I've learned lots of new words. Poggers, never knew what that meant. But anyway, it seems to work very well for them. And I found it worked for me. It was so much more relaxed. In the old days where you had a lecture, a bit like this here, I've got so many slides and I'm going to think, I'm nearly finished. I've got to rush the ending. Whereas in a consolidation lecture, do you know what, if I didn't get to that last thing, who cares? I've said I'm only talking about selected slides. So they've got something about it. They want to get the full thing, go back to the notes, go back to the lectures, recorded lectures. Worked for me, 25 out of 42 this week. That was about the numbers that was pretty consistent. Am I worried about this? These things aren't compulsory, so I shouldn't be worried about them, should I? And my thoughts are, well, you know, for the ones that didn't turn out, they have got those high quality pre-recorded lectures to go back to. So I think it's working for me and them. Computer material, generally, you know, tell them stuff they've got to do, kind of breaks down into two things. Each week, in this case, for this particular week, there was 4 key skills that they've got to master through repeated use. And then there's some analysis templates and solutions that are released at the end of the week. So I better just talk about what those are. They're just basically, it's a data set with instructions on what to do. I've basically done the analysis, written it up and taken things out, and it's up to them to put things back in, which of course is a slightly different skill to doing an e-assessment where it's all on the screen and you just put things in the box. Here you've got to make that graph and, you know, make sure you import it in the right way and things like that, you know, so slightly a bit more thought about things. So that's another idea that goes on in there. The case studies, again, it was a new way of doing things, group case studies. Did it work for them? Did it work for me? Well, how these are, basically we come into a 1 hour session. I would just literally pull up the materials, try to get something that was a real worldy thing from a paper or something like that, get the associated data set ready for them, talk to them about certain things, you know, a few pointers of where to go, probably 2 or 3 minutes, and I'd say, right, get on with it in groups. And I'll just sit at the front, having a coffee, feet up, catching up with emails, answer anything that gets important. But to me, it really worked because they were really working together. They were rising to the challenge, and it worked for me. I got space to catch up on things, part of that payback for all the effort that you put into these digital resources. Answers, well, okay, my answers in this case for this particular one, a 21-minute video of my thoughts that they could watch in their own times. I would always get the groups to put up their reports. Should be peer judged. I think that'd be a nice thing to add at some level, you know, some ideas. But, you know, the encouragement to look at what everyone else does and does it match up to whatever I said in the video solution. Right, so coming to the in-class tests. So students would have, when there's a test coming up, would have unlimited attempts at a practice test. The practice test is exactly the same as the test that they're going to sit in class, okay? Except every time they do a test, it's different data, which might have different outcomes, okay? But the idea is they practice in their own time, get used to all the different outcomes that they could be getting until they feel that they're ready to come to that classroom and do the test, okay? Now, the way the timetable worked out, I would debrief them about next week's test. I would debrief them on a Friday afternoon it was, you know, they would then have 3 days of practice tests, okay, before the in-class test. Now that happened to be in this case over the weekend, but how authentic is that? Okay, work the weekend, you know, that is to me part of the real life experience. So it's up to them. They've got to manage themselves whether they choose to work over the weekend or how they do it, or they leave it to Monday before the test on Tuesday. And it's up to them how they do with that practice, okay? The tests were run in the same room and session that's timetabled. So for 42, it would be repeat. I would have 2 sessions for that. Again, this worked for me. I didn't have to do any more organising. You know, they would just come into these sessions. If they've done the practice, they'll just do the test. And again, it worked for me because I just sat there doing nothing. And I had 2 more, you know, during test week, I had 2 more hours where a bit of free space, not so relaxed. Again, payback for all that effort into the digital stuff I created. So the sessions were scheduled for 50 minutes, you know, the 1 hour slot as such. So that kind of meant that the test would have to be about 30 minutes long. Idea of that obviously is, again, accessibility. Deris knows, you know, if someone's got allowed to 25% or 50% reasonable adjustment, so that will be in there. These are time things which Deris manages. You would run out of time if you don't submit in the time. There is a button in there that says time remaining. So again, onus on the student to do that. Again, these sessions, as I said, work for me. I saw it as a bit of free space where it was a low stress week for me. First of all, we'll look at in-class test 1. I won't show you all the in-class tests, but this one was slightly a bit different. Don't worry, don't read this. It's just the principles that I'll talk through. These are more or less my aids. So what's the students got to do here? Well, they've got to download some data and get it into SPSS. When it gets into SPSS, it's got some recoding that's got to be done, and I'd like to test them how to do that. So they'll have to do some recoding. So that's the setup in SPSS. So that's a skill I would like to check they do that. So for this first one, it wasn't all entirely marked within Deris. This one, part of the submission was they had to mail me their SPSS data file, and I could see whether they'd done all the coding things that they should have done. Okay, so that's how I kind of got around that, checking that, we do that. Then they would have the bit that Deris questions that they would answer and mark. And then finally, there'll be a template. So they use this idea of templates, and they would mail that to me, and I would check. That was in checking that they could create the graphs and import them into Word. And I wasn't quite sure how I could get that assessed in Deris. So from that point of view, this one's slightly unique. There are these 2 other things that are mailed to me for a little bit of handwriting, this sort of blend, handmarking, not handwriting. Handwriting doesn't exist anymore. I don't think I do it anymore. It's a digital age. There was a template. This ends up being the marking scheme. The 3 bits, as I said, one bit entirely by Dewis, the other bit, a little bit of hand marking. And the students, of course, when they submit, they'll get their answers and they can see, part of my solutions would have the graphs that they should have been creating. So they should know at that point if they've kind of done things right and they can check through things. So how did it work? Well, practice tests, these are the number of attempts. Okay, so what do we see here? Well, first of all, 9 people chose not to practice at all. Okay, I have to think about that, were they ill and the rest of it. But in this particular case, on average, the median 2 attempts at it. Some people are feeling they need to do a few more attempts before they're ready. The actual marks, as you can see from the marks, everyone was getting high marks virtually. Okay, some people not. And obviously I can address that issue at this point because this is week 2, really early on. Hit the ground running, I want them with this thing, moving things to be continuous. Let's start almost as close to time 0 as we can get to get those people to see whether they're still going on. 2 non-submissions out of the 42. Again, contacted them, checked was everything okay. I think one of them was COVID. So you kind of got an answer there, sort of thing, that's engaging. But anyway, hit the ground running, week 2, that was going on. Then there was a few weeks of mathematical statistics, but finally I get to a situation, week 7. This is a second test, which is starting to get a bit more, I'll just show you it because of the style of things, is closer to the way generally you use Dewis. So in this question here, what have we got here? So we've got a question where each time, it's a random question, each time the null hypothesis will change. Be checking to see a different null hypothesis, so that'll be random each time the student does it. As would be the sample size the student gets, that's random. Part of the reason to do that was that they need to make a test judgment, and one of the things that you decide whether you should be doing this test or that test will be looking at how much data you've got. So again, it's important here that this was changing each time a student would do it. And also, they've got to basically work through this and decide upon which test they should be doing. The first choice test, if they can make all the test assumptions, or the second, the non-parametric one. So, so here are the questions they've got to do. So first of all, there's some bit of EDA, where, for instance, they'll be looking at the mean and interpreting it. Well, that was a key skill that I showed you a bit earlier. So that key skill would be for that particular marks. And again, this makes it very easy for me to, when I say that there's a test coming up soon, these are all the key skills that are basically being used in this test. Make sure, if you're struggling on the practice tests, go back to the relevant key skill. Don't come back to me, go back to that first sort of thing, and then come to me if you can't sort yourselves out. Okay, things on skewness, we've got to make skewness assessment and normality assessments. Again, along with sample size, these 2 other things come into which test. Decision rules for which test they should be picking, okay? So when they come to look at the test, here's the 2 tests. They can only pick one of them. They've got to decide which one they should be picking. There is some decision rules. These are my rules, a bit controversial because, you've got to, you're doing computer programs, so there's got to be hard and fast rules when people don't, some people say, oh, I wouldn't teach it like that. Well, this is where on a big module to 1,000, and in the time I've had 23 different other lecturers that are involved in my team to these business students, got to leave the ego at the door for that bit. It's like, sorry, these are the rules that they're being taught, okay, they're not ideal, but it makes them doing something which is a slightly bit more justifiable than whatever we taught before, okay? So when they decide which test they should be doing, okay, with those decision rules, they will then move on. Pick a test. So here we go, pick a test. They've decided here we're going to do the 1 sample t-test, do various things in there to answer about that. And obviously there's a bit of test interpretation. Other people might have decided they would do the Wilcoxon sign rank test, might have decided that was more appropriate for their data, along with the test interpretation. Okay. When they submit, they can again look back at all the feedback. In the main test solution, if they had a green box around the test choice, that green box means that is the correct test choice. Okay, there was 3 marks for making that test choice. If they pick the wrong test, then it still gets marked. They don't get the 3 marks for the test choice, but they'll get the follow-through marking for that. Okay, and again, a bit of extra feedback. This is why you should have picked that particular test. Hopefully that explains if they have got it wrong. At the time when I was doing this, it was during COVID, and it was to the 1,000, and I was thinking, how are we doing online? Is this going to work? It was a big stressful time for those of us that were involved in big cohorts. And at this particular point, I thought I needed a new resource. Okay, and I thought, well, I don't want to do something similar to what I've already done. I've got to do something different. So I took inspiration from Sid Snott, Penny Everett's character, who was someone that was a little bit more colloquial, let's say, and I wanted something that was going to be a little bit different. Okay, so I ended up coming up with what I call short and sweet videos, which were basically looking at each key skill, but having this character that was a little bit exaggerating my Mockney accent a bit more, let's say, and talked a bit more colloquially. And each of them were short and had different grades of sweetness. This one was treacle, some other ones might be glacé or saccharine or something like that, make things up. And anyway, I did these as a bit of fun. Literally, I was enjoying myself during COVID. And it turns out that these ended up being incredibly popular to the extent that I end up getting complaints that I only did so many of them. And it was literally from students, the feedback came from the student committee, and they said, why are these only on the first test? Why aren't we having the other? And you had to explain, well, it was out of the goodness of my heart, I decided to do it. And it takes a long time. And anyway, it was quite funny. So the Sid Snott inspiration came out well. Obviously, people old enough to see the Sex Pistols reference here. Great invite, great timing. John Lydon was playing in Glasgow last night, so saw PIO last night, so great timing, organisers. In class test 2, so now we're doing things which are more like the rest of the DOIS tests. So what we notice here is the amount of practicing is going up as things start to get a little bit more complicated. The amount of no practicing is going down. Are they getting used to the system, or are they realising they've got to do it? So that was heading in the right direction. Someone getting a little bit obsessive, no problem with that. So that trend actually carried on, and a few other people enjoyed this other obsessive person doing ridiculous amounts, sort of thing. In the business school, the most I ever saw an in-class test was 167 attempts. And yes, the person got 100% sort of thing in that test. So good news, practice makes perfect. Test marks, again, really, really good. Like most people are getting 100. 0 non-submissions, I think, and this is good. Everyone's engaged. So second test, so looking good. This is the sort of the rest of the 6 tests, practice, what happened to the practices. Well, with the practice, kind of notice, you look at that, it was sort of kind of pretty steady. Something going on there, something going on there. So what do I take away from looking at all this? Well, one thing is that not all test takers make use of practice tests. I don't get this. If someone said to me, you've got an exam next week, this exam exactly the same but different, I would do it. Probably 50 times now. So I'd be that person. But some people choose not to do it. It might be life, I don't know. But I'd really love to find out about that, the people that aren't doing it and the reasons why. That'd be great to know. Coming out of that, getting high marks. Is that a good thing, bad thing? I think it's a good thing. Does it show it's too easy, or does it show they're doing it and learning? Tests 5 and 6, we can see less practicing and less actually doing it. This might be tactical engagement, because remember, it's best 5 from 6. Some people might have thought, I've already passed this by test 4, so it could be tactical. But certainly, if I look at test 6, what's going on here? Here it's really jumped up. So something a bit odd about test 6. So let me just show you test 6. Test 6, again, don't read that. It's the sentiments. What's going to happen? Well, download a data set, okay? It's got more variables, so things are getting bigger. It's a multiple regression they've got to do here. They've got to import it into SPSS and do all the coding. So yeah, it's a bit more work there, okay? A bit more work to do. Then we start to see what they've actually got to do. Well, there's some of the questions. They've got to do some EDAs and correlations and multicollinearity, t-test, all that stuff, right? Okay, that's more. They've got to do more. Backwards elimination model. They've got to examine the fit of the model. Remember, this is in 30 minutes. Significance or not of each of all the dependent variables. They've got to do all that. They've got to look at the importance of the independent variables. They've got to look for model outliers. They've got to look for predictions. So there's a lot of work. Okay. Works out there could be up to 94 inputs that they've got to do in 30 minutes. Wow, this is they're getting slightly, through these getting more complicated. Is that too much? Well, on the brief on Friday, I showed them the DOIS management system. And I said, look, I've had one go at it, 100% me. And right, okay. Then I look at the things, when I started the test and when I submitted. show them that, and then we work out, I'll get 100% in 8 minutes. So for a small amount of time, I let them believe that I'm godlike in statistics and the rest of it. And I'd say, no, actually it's not. Something else is going on. And I send them down, remember this is Friday afternoon for the test on Tuesday, and it's a weekend when they want to enjoy themselves. So I send them down the rabbit hole of, I've done this because of syntax from SPSS. They haven't been taught this at this point. So they've got an 18-minute video that says to them, well, as you go along and do your practice test, you can make the syntax, get it all together, which means when you come to do your next practice test or the main test, run the syntax, all that button pressing's gone away, and then you could be a lot quicker, okay? So this is dropped onto them. I said Friday afternoon, at that point I leave the room, so have a good weekend, and we'll see them on Tuesday. So that's possibly why I think some people didn't join in this. I did warn them, this is week 19, so very close to project week, the end of the module. I did say this, you know, if you don't do this, it'll come back to bite you on the bum because you'll be using it in project week. But still, some people, for whatever reason, possibly thought it was too hard. So the marks for this component, best 5 from 6 marks, 97.6% pass rate. Okay, so only one person we got some problems with, so we've got one reset. Reset's going to be nice and easily. It's going to be online 24-hour exam where they've got to do all 6 of these tests again. So quite easy once it's all set up. You know, it works for me, the reset. I don't have to come in and invigilate a day, etc. So moving on to the project week, what we got? Well, this is worth 35% of module assessment. It's this problem-based learning activity, which comes from consultancy that I actually did on behalf of UE, so it is authentic. So end up seeing them sessions throughout the week, in the morning and in the afternoon. And yes, some starting 8:30. Let's make this realistic. I want it to be like you've gone to work for a company and they say, we've got this urgent job, you've got to finish it by the end of the week, that kind of experience. Okay. So individual activity in between sessions on their own bespoke data. As we're going to see, the data ultimately comes from DEWIS, so everyone's working on the same problem but different data. So you know you can guarantee that you'll be what you get is the work that someone actually has done. Plus also would have Monday to Friday daily engagement activities that are going continuously through that week. So 40% of the final mark for this whole week is through daily activities. Okay, and then they do a written report that was due the following Thursday, which is worth 60%. So health warning slides, I've got to probably rush through these, don't read them. These slides are more or less just for me to remember what I'm trying to say, so don't worry too much about it. But these are actual slides that the students would have seen in these sessions that I would have run. So first of all, the background they've got to do, this consultancy stuff, I've told them the background to it, so I've got them interested, you know, this is the problem, okay? And then talks about, well, you know, in a situation like this, I've got to talk with the client and work out what the client wants, okay? And the client basically here was trying to work out why people are leaving and how does it relate to attitudes and also demographic and job-related variables. So that was a scenario we're looking at. All through the week, we'd have slides which would talk about best practices of things that you do. These things don't get taught during the normal teaching weeks. So for instance, here's an activity log. We gave them a template to do for each of the morning and afternoon sessions and the rest of it. And handing that in at the end of the week was worth 5% and made them aware of, you know, who you were with, what were you doing, why, and all that, to fill those out. So nice bit of soft bit of assessment there. Used a lot of breakout groups that basically, for instance, this Monday morning, you know, get them to think first of all, but I tell them before I actually give them what actually the data is. So day one, you know, what questions should we ask to, you know, get a survey? Again, dropping new ideas on them. This whole point, they've never met latent variables before. So that was a new concept to them. So I introduced them to new things in this week as well that they've got to get their heads around. And it ends up that what we wanted them to work on was their own, first of all, had to go at their own, collecting their own data. What questions would they ask? So these were the variables that I wanted to use. These ones were the latent variables, so 2 indicators for those. So in total, they had to design something that had 13 variables. They would then go off and work with this. So that's all in an hour Monday morning. So they've got all their work to do the rest of the Monday morning. They then saw Ben, my colleague, in the afternoon, who in the previous 2 weeks had been teaching in Qualtrics, so it was all dovetailing in nicely. So they have a session where they take all of their questions that they think they would do, their design as such, and at the end of the day, worth 10%. So by 8 o'clock, they had to submit something which was the questionnaire, a link to what they've done in Qualtrics, that was marked, and also some synopsis of why they chose those particular variables, okay? So by 8 o'clock, so they've had an 11-hour day, multiply that by 555 hours, that's authentic to me, that's where you are working for someone here at this particular point. The questionnaire, Tuesday morning, I sort of say to them, right, okay, well, you've done your design. Actually, this is the data that I actually got. So from this point on, we're working with the sort of data set that they're going to be doing stuff on. It turns out with the number of variables that he got, it turned out there were 22 variables I got when I did this consultancy. So all of these ones, so these are our 3 latent variables that are in there. Okay. So I then gave them a generic data set, which was my data set. They were about to get their own one, which was different. In breakout groups, told them to look through and work out what they've got to do with this before it's then oven ready to start analysing things. I would then talk to them and say, okay, you should have picked up on these things. Again, new ideas, like they'd never met a variable coming in as a string variable. So we'll discuss what's wrong with string variables and what you'd have to do to change it. So again, lots of new ideas. And ultimately, this is the data set that they should be working towards. They then would get their own data from Deris. So they've got 22 variables, but it's their own ones, okay? So they would then get their own data, again, things like best practices about as you change things to put version numbers, things like that, all these things that you could build into this whole week. Again, remind them about SPSS syntax file. Told them at the end of the day, for 5%, they've got to actually put their syntax for that first day in there, okay? So again, things they've got to think about. So they will then go away, start working. So Tuesday morning, do a bit of working. Part of that, I said at the end of Tuesday morning, before I see them Tuesday afternoon, do some EDA of your data set so you kind of know what's sort of going on. Then told them Tuesday afternoon it was fun time. Now the work really starts because they've got the data almost ready, or so they think. Bring in new ideas, ID variable, talk about why it's good. Don't tell them how to do it, give them a link. FOFO or things like that, a bit out, old school sort of thing, but that's what I kind of wanted to replicate. That was very much like when I worked in industry, you were just fed little bits and then just told to go off and do it. So anyway, new ideas being fed to them as practices. So when they were doing EDA, this is my data, looking at the leave variable, right, I've learned 30% roughly, whatever it is, of people wanting to leave. But then all the rest of the variables, I built in things that were going wrong with that variable, the things that you need to do. Again, this isn't the sort of stuff that you normally teach during a teaching time. This is the stuff they normally get when they come to do a project at the third year, where the variable isn't quite perfect. So in here, we talked about gender, a question about gender. Did talk about, in the best practice, about how do we write this minefield of gender questions, set them off in a direction, to have a look at what you should be doing. And in my data set here, I've got females, males, and I've got a minority gender here, an omnigender, discussing, well, I can statistically work with these two, but I haven't got enough data here, okay? So again, with all these students, they would have, they might have a trans or something else. Everyone would have one or two minority different, but it will slightly be different, but the same problem. The data needs something to do. We have to talk about, you've got to make that into a missing variable. Things like age variable here, in my data set, I've got a 6-year-old working for the company. It's an outlier. Then gave the information, well, went back to the client. It's obviously an outlier. So again, these sort of things to think about when you get data. Length of service. When it was given to me, I was actually given 2 variables, length of service in years and length of service in months. Well, you've got to compute some decimal length of service, talking about things like that transformation of variables. Here we got one where we've actually had a category in there that's actually not answered. Well, again, we've got to make that into set that to be missing. What store do these people work at? Well, it's about 20 odd different stores there. What do we do with this? How do we combine these stores? These are all things that we do as statisticians when we get a data set. We've got to think, how do we get these variables ready so we can start doing some analysis? So, had a discussion with them, told them about this store supposed to be in the south of England, and then find out that, a bit of Googling, we find out, well, that's what the south of England is. And then give them a breakout session for 5 minutes to say, well, there's all the stores, you do the coding, and then see how good they are with their geography. When they do that, here's my data set, fine, London, South East and South West, find out I only had 2 stores from the East. But we know what to do here. We know we've got to somehow either combine or lose those. Again, in this particular case, again, information that came back from the client that we could combine the East stores, we could call that London and Essex and make it all one for particular reasons. Okay? So this was again something that would be something which appear a bit later. At this point, when they come to do multiple regression, they've only worked with binary nominal variables. Suddenly they've got 3 there. How are they going to do that? Well, we're going to find out about that when we start talking about multiple regression again. New ideas given to them this week. Tuesday PM, the latent variable, yeah. So there's the latent variable. We talk about if we're going to create a store here, that's, if we looked at their correlations, they should all be highly correlated. And one thing that we notice is that one needs to be reverse coded. Again, a problem that statisticians will frequently get. So again, new idea about reverse coding. Once they've done that, I show them with my data set, I could then get a score for that latent variable that they could be working with. Of course, they've got to do that with the other latent variables, repetition, repetition, repetition. Submissions at the end of Tuesday, they've got a DEVIS assessment worth 5%. Okay, remember they've got their bespoke data. If they've done all that data transformation correctly, then they'll get 5%. If they haven't, they've I've got that thing to discern. Well, you haven't done things correctly, and we've got to do something. Also wanted the syntax in. Nice, easy way for me to mark it. So the 2 submissions by 8 o'clock that night. Oh yeah, I dropped a bombshell on them. I told them, warned them, this wasn't too authentic, but sometimes when you're busy, someone asks you to do something else. So the submission window for this was between 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock. Right? At 4:30, I sent them a request to do something else. Okay, and amazing, they already worked it. It was something they've never seen before in SPSS. Well, a couple of slides about, this is what you've got to do. Good luck, and it was only worth, 1 mark sort of thing out of this. So it was no big gamble, but it's authentic. Here is, 10 questions here for them to do that should check they've done Tuesday correctly. Important thing there, feedback and feed forward. They get their feedback to see what they've done correctly on Tuesday with all that stuff. Feed forward. If they haven't, they have that chance to correct things going forward. So feedback, feed forward. Obviously got the syntax to do as well. Wednesday morning, I make them aware that they've got to do a lot of analysis of all techniques. It turns out all the things that I taught them, all of them they're going to see during this week, bar 1. I didn't tell them which one they weren't going to see, but it really did take in all of my teaching. One of the concerns is if someone wasn't very good with all that data transformation, crap in, crap out, how do I work with that? Well, I decided to release SPSS ready versions where everything was coded for anyone that hadn't done well, that they could then carry on the rest of the week with the data ready for them. They'd already been penalised for not quite doing it in that mark. So that's the way I kind of got around with all of that. They then had to do some bivariate analysis with the major dependent variable. Again, give them a chance in the breakout group to work out what analysis they should do before we then discuss them, and then show them what they should be doing on their own with their own data. Okay. Again, making it impressing upon them that the more they do now, get things ready, the easier the write-up's going to be. Okay. This here, impressing upon them, at this particular point, with Wednesday morning, you should have a rough idea by Wednesday dinner time why someone is leaving this company, okay? And what would they say to a client if they just suddenly had an informal progress meeting? And I carried this out, that if I then bumped into someone at a coffee shop, I'll just turn around to them and recognise them, and I'll just say, oh yeah, so why are people leaving? Okay. The best one was I went to the gents, and I walked up and there was a student there. And you imagine the scenario. I looked across and said, so why are people leaving? And to me, that was authentic. It's my take on authentic. It really was. And the student replied, didn't think anything of the scenario. So I think the kind of role play aspect kind of went quite well for me. Wednesday afternoon, another checkpoint. So they've got a checkpoint there worth 5% to check they've done Wednesday morning okay. Wednesday afternoon was pretty similar, but with another dependent variable. Okay, so pretty similar. That's all similar. Again, there was a checkpoint worth 5% for that. So that was the end of Wednesday. Thursday morning, we're doing multiple regression. Okay, so I asked them in the breakout, we talked about it, a multiple regression with one of the dependent variables, told them make a cookbook of things that they should be doing, and we'll compare it to, they'll send it to me and I'll prepare it, but also told them there's a problem. Pre-warned them there's a problem with one variable, it's that store variable. They never would have had a nominal variable at 3 levels before. So made them aware of something. So then I would talk about the cookbook, these are the things that you should be doing, and then talks about how we get around this problem. So again, throwing new ideas at them, okay? So then told them to go away and do it. Thursday afternoon, we're reviewing things. They're still working through the day on their own stuff, reviewing things. All the new techniques are met. When I put the slide up, that was quite impressive. All the new stuff that was going on and things like that, and how everything was coming in. Made sure with interpretation things are understood. Talk to them about heading into the next academic year. For instance, that variable leaving, it was binary. Why couldn't we do multiple regression with that? Well, because it's binary, and next year you'll do binary logistic regression. So talking about all things, getting excited, hopefully, about next year. They'll then carry on modelling for the rest of Thursday. Before, of course, they would have a checkpoint that evening that they've got to do. Then they're getting marked upon. Friday morning, Ben took over with the report writing, did a fantastic job of, again, how would we normally have done this? Possibly when they got to probably about the second or third year, they would have had some attempt at report writing, which we would then give them feedback saying, oh, I would have done it like this, I would have done it like that. But here, Ben preempted that and kind of gave them, sort of talked to them about structures and what should be in there. You know, they've only had to do this in 8 pages, loads of statistical analysis. How they get it in 8 pages? And Ben will talk about all these issues. End of the day, they've got the activity log to put in. Okay, so what do the marks look like? So reminder, so 60% of the written report, these are all the daily activities worth 40% that we're continuously assessing through the week. Those are the marks. Okay, so generally people are good. These people were 2 people that didn't actually end up doing a report for whatever reason. They started with some of the weekly smaller engagements but didn't go through with it. So overall, the module, this is the portfolio mark. So this is the project week plus the traditional coursework. That had a pass rate nice and high. Okay, again, we've got to think about retakes. So retakes online, they will repeat project week with all the materials we've already made. The recordings of all the sessions will be put up there to work through. Of course, they'll have new data when they go through it. So if you are a resitter, rather than didn't attempt it first time, you'll get different data to work on. Plus, they'll get a new mathematical statistics coursework to work on. Overall module rate, 85.7% passing, okay. Resits, I've got 1 person that's got to do both the test and the portfolio, and I've got 5 that got to do resit the portfolio. So that was the assessment strategy. Again, remember, I'm trying to replace the traditional form of exam and coursework. If I look back to this slide here, the assessment here, I've now broke it up. How much is this the future? Digital stuff. 85% of this new way of assessing is digital. 15% is still harking back to the past. Am I worried about this? No, I want to keep some of the past in there, especially as Ben marks it, not me. My bit's in this bit sort of thing. So I'm getting the automated bit. But then again, out of fairness, I've had to put all in the digital effort, that sort of thing. Is that recurring themes that are going on here? How well am I doing coming back to here? Well, going through these, actually, I'm quite happy until I spoke to saw Craig's thing where I thought, oh, I could do a bit more here. But, you know, I've put all my effort for the last 10 years into the content. And yeah, this is something that, again, it's something that's got to be done. But if, you know, I was concentrating on the content and again, sort of thinking about what can I do for that for the future. That's it.